This is the fourth video on Chapter 3 on globalization. So continuing on with our discussion of the International Criminal Court of the ICC, wanted to show you the organization's website here. All right, so you can see this is an international organization. So this is looking at individuals, right? So we're looking at individuals that have committed international crimes. So what exactly are they looking at as far as international crimes? So you can see here about the court, what did they do? So we're looking at, pretty bad stuff here. So most serious crimes of concern to the international community. So let's see, we're thinking about things like war crimes, crimes against peace, crimes against humanity, those type of things. So we're thinking about mass murder, these type of atrocities, killing for ethnic or religious, racial reasons, all these kind of things. So remember back from our slide where it says ICC prosecuting African dictators, because those unfortunately have been a lot of the folks that have been engaged in these kind of war crimes, crimes against humanity, these type of things. So if you just remember the criminal court, right? So they're looking at individual, people that are suspected of being international war criminals, those type of folks. So that has been one of the criticisms of the ICC, though, is that it has only gone after people from one, gone after one region of the world. People say, that they should open that up to, target people in other areas as well. So the United States is not a party to the International Criminal Court, meaning we are not, but we have not ratified that, so we are not involved with the ICC. One of the reasons has been is that our military is involved in so many different countries in the world, and our government has been worried that other countries would try to submit or send American military personnel to the ICC for various reasons. So we've been, say for example, the war in Iraq, something like that. We're kind of worried about people using it for like sort of political ends or something like that. So at the moment, the United States is not involved there. So neither are we involved in the International Court of Justice, which is a little bit different. As you can see, it's ICJ. So instead of looking at individuals, the ICJ only hears cases between states or countries, or gives advisory opinions. So an example of something that might go before the International Court of Justice would be two countries that have a major disagreement over a border area. So for example, one country thinks the border should stop at a river or something, and the other country thinks the border should stop somewhere else. The ICJ, for example, can give an advisory opinion on that, or decide one way or the other. Now, the problem with all of these types of international legal tribunals and organizations, institutions, it comes up a lot with the issue of enforcement. So just because the ICJ, for example, rules in a certain way, will the countries involved actually agree to the conditions, or will it actually work? Long story short. So for example, again, thinking about the United States, you see this court case, Nicaragua versus United States. So let me show you here. This is the case, right? So military and paramilitary activities in and against Nicaragua, right? Is the basis of the court case here. So this was in the mid-1980s here, right? So June 1986. So this came about because the idea the Nicaraguan government complained that the United States had, basically put mines and things in some of their waterways, or as you can see here, the United States was criticized that it was training, arming, equipping, financing the Contra forces, basically the folks, the rebels against the Nicaraguan government there, aiding these activities, acted against the Republic of Nicaragua in breach of its obligation under customary international law, right? Not to intervene in the affairs of another state. So basically the ICJ, again, you can see very sort of international group of justices here. They decided in favor of Nicaragua, right? That actually, by 12 votes to 3 on most of these, 11 votes to 4, and this other one 14 to 1 here, right? Um, found in favor of Nicaraguan government versus the United States. So what happened as a result of that? Well, not a whole lot. Like I said, the enforcement issue always comes up. So after that ruling, or after that judicial decision, the United States dropped out of the ICJ, right? So there really was never any sort of major penalty or anything like that. So instead of submitting to the will of the ICJ, the United States just left the organization. So that kind of gives you an example of somehow where sometimes when, even if we have certain institutions and organizations in the international community, that sometimes if people don't want to abide by their rulings, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it, right? Nicaragua wasn't exactly going to go to war with the United States over that issue. So on the previous slide, we were talking about the responsibility to protect. So I also wanted to show you the website related to that. So you can see right now the United Nations has a special advisor on the prevention of genocide. Right? So speaking about this idea of responsibility to protect, right? Again, you can see some of these pillars of responsibility that the UN has decided upon, right? State carries a primary responsibility for protecting populations from genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so forth, right? So you can see how a lot of these responsibility to protect issues kind of go hand in hand with some of the International Criminal Court, or the ICC issues there, right? Where again, rulers in particular, like a dictator, would be seen as failing in their responsibility to protect on these various things. All right, so then to finish this one up, so this video will be a bit shorter than the other one, so we won't go the full 15 minutes. So your chapter finishes with this discussion of, is globalization a new ideology? So as we looked at in the previous chapter, where a couple of scholars argued that nationalism was more like a thin ideology, wasn't, or like a partial, wasn't maybe a full one. Globalization in some ways can be seen in the same way. Whereas this idea, maybe it's more of a thin, maybe it's more of a full. Again, it depends on your sort of standpoint. But like nationalism, I would agree with Sargent, your textbook author, that in any case, whether you think it's a full or ideology or not, it's hard to understand the 21st century world in which we live without an understanding of globalization. And I do think if we look at the base definition of an ideology, right, a value system or a core set of beliefs held as truth by a group of people, globalization to me seems to fit in pretty well with that. So the other part here, this sort of idea of thinking about, is there this shift from a national to more of a global imaginary? So remember, right, a lot of these things we look at in this class, like nationalism and globalization, that the idea of, where we live and, country boundaries, all that kind of stuff, is sort of an imagined concept. So, that there's not some, border, like a blue line on the dirt that you walk across as a border or something like that. So related to what we looked at in the last chapter with more of cosmopolitanism, right? The idea of sort of a global citizen, instead of, I'm an American, he's a, Italian, something like that. That maybe we're seeing this sort of shift to people having more of this global imaginary, kind of seeing ourselves as more global citizens, global society, those type of things. So that should give you a good comprehensive look at our chapter on globalization. So we'll go ahead and end the video now.